I woke up to a sound that didn't belong to the hour. Not the wind clawing at the siding, not the radiator groaning like it always did when the temperature dipped below zero. No, this was a knock. A faint, uneven knock. Like someone barely had the strength to try. My phone screen burned my eyes when I checked it, 4:30 a.m. For a few seconds, I stayed perfectly still under the blanket, wondering if the storm was playing tricks on me. The wind had been howling since midnight, rising and dropping like something alive. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe. Another knock. Then a small voice. "Auntie? Are you awake?" My heart shot into my throat. I swung my legs out of bed and nearly slipped on the cold floor. The hardwood felt like ice. My duplex was old, the insulation half-rotted, and the heating system did what it could, but this was subzero wind chill, the kind of cold that punished you for existing. When I reached the front door, the peephole was useless. The outside was a blur of darkness and blowing snow. I cracked the door open with the chain still latched. 2 small figures stood on my porch. My niece, Lily, 7 years old. My nephew, Mason, 9. Both of them were in thin pajamas, no coats, no shoes, just socks soaked through and stiff like cardboard. Their hair was crusted with frost. Their lips were turning blue. Snow clung to their eyelashes. Lily's whole body shivered so hard she could barely stand. "Auntie," Mason whispered, voice shaking, the door locked behind us. We tried to go back. We tried. But Mom and Dad wouldn't. He stopped, swallowed hard. They didn't open. I felt my pulse in my throat, hot and sharp. Their skin was ice cold when I touched them. Not cold, dangerous cold. The kind of cold I'd seen too many times in the ER. "Jesus, get inside, now," I said, fumbling with the chain, throwing the door open wide. The storm roared in behind them like it wanted to swallow us whole. They stumbled inside and collapsed onto the floorboards, trembling violently. Lily tried to speak but her teeth chattered too hard for words to form. Mason held her like he thought she might disappear. I shut the door, locked it, and dropped to my knees beside them, my hands already moving on instinct, checking pulses, checking breathing, assessing for frostnip or worse. I should have been scared. But mostly, I was furious. A deep, bone-hot fury that told me something I hadn't allowed myself to believe until that moment. I was the only person who was ever going to save these kids. And their parents, their own parents, were the danger. I carried each of them to the couch, one under each arm, like they weighed nothing at all. Years working in the ER had trained my body to move quickly when adrenaline hit, even though my duplex was cramped and the furniture too close together. The space heater hummed in the corner, the one I always kept running through the winter because my rental's heating system had a mind of its own. The place wasn't fancy. Hand-me-down love seat, thrift store coffee table, old blankets washed so many times the colors had faded, but the moment the kids stepped inside, it felt like the safest place in the world. I wrapped Lily and Mason in my thickest quilts, layering them until only their eyes peeked out. Their small bodies trembled violently as the cold left them in waves. "Stay awake," I said, crouched in front of them. "Talk to me. Tell me what happened." Mason stared at the floor, jaw clenched. Lily leaned into him, still crying but too exhausted to make noise. I grabbed my stethoscope out of my work bag and listened to their breathing. Shallow. Fast. Borderline wheezing. Frost exposure. Early hypothermia. "Okay," I murmured, mostly to myself as I felt Lily's pulse, weak but present. "You're going to be fine. Both of you. Just stay awake." When I touched Mason's hands, he flinched. They were freezing. Actually freezing. I put warm compresses on their fingers and toes and checked their skin for frost nip, discolored patches, stiffness, tenderness. I'd seen worse, but never on kids I loved. Never from something like this. When they were stable enough to talk, I knelt again. Why were you outside without jackets? Where were your parents? Lily sniffled. Mommy and Daddy went to a party. With lots of loud music. And people wearing sparkly dresses. That tracked. My brother, Ethan, and his wife, Sabrina, loved their parties. Their photos were always plastered across social media, designer clothes, expensive wine, luxury everything. Mason swallowed hard. They said the babysitter was coming, but she never came. And the heat wasn't working in the house. I stilled. What do you mean, not working? It was really cold, he whispered. I could see my breath. That house was a 3-story mansion in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. Heated floors. Smart thermostats. A home gym the size of my living room. But not heat for the kids. Why did you go outside? I asked gently. We were looking for help. Mason's voice cracked. Lily was crying because her hands hurt, and the house was dark, and we heard a noise outside. I thought it was the sitter. But he looked at me with wide, guilty eyes. I closed the door behind us. And it locked. I didn't know the code changed. The code changed? I repeated, heart pounding. He nodded, tears spilling over. I tried all the numbers Dad gave me. None worked. Of course they didn't. Ethan loved showing off his smart home tech whenever he had guests, doors that locked automatically, lights that responded to voice commands, thermostats he could control from his phone. But he'd changed the code and not bothered to tell his own son. How long were you outside? I asked. I'm not sure, Mason whispered. Maybe an hour? Maybe more. It was really cold. My phone died. They didn't have coats. Or shoes. Or a working heater. Or a babysitter. Just each other. And me. I stood so quickly I nearly knocked over a lamp. I'm calling 911. Mason panicked. No. Dad will get mad. Your dad, I said, voice low and steady, can deal with me later. I called the emergency line, giving the dispatcher every detail. Children, frozen, underdressed, early hypothermia, ages 7 and 9. She told me to keep them warm and awake. Ambulance is on the way, I said, returning to them. Lily reached for my hand, voice trembling. Auntie, are we in trouble? I sat beside her, pulling both kids into my arms. No, sweetheart, I whispered. You're safe now. Nothing is your fault. But her question twisted something deep inside me, something made of old resentment and new rage. This wasn't the first time I'd worried about them. I'd noticed things over the years. Little hints. Offhand comments. Bruises that didn't have clear explanations. The way the kids clung to me when I babysat. The empty fridge I'd seen once during a holiday visit. The fact that they always wore designer clothes, yet none ever fit correctly, too small or too big, like someone bought them without care. Whenever I brought concerns up to Ethan or Sabrina, they brushed me off. They're dramatic. You're too sensitive, you work in healthcare, you see danger everywhere. You're jealous. You wouldn't understand our lifestyle. Their lifestyle had always been a thin shield over a mountain of irresponsibility. But tonight? Tonight wasn't a red flag. It was a siren. Outside, the ambulance's lights flashed against the blowing snow, casting red and blue shadows across my living room. The kid stared toward the window, eyes wide, not scared, just tired. "Let's go," I said softly. "I'm right here. I'm not leaving you." I wrapped them in my warmest coats, shoes too big on their feet. Mason's hand clutched mine so tightly that his fingers trembled. As we stepped onto my porch, the wind cut through us like a blade. The snow stung my face. The street was empty except for the paramedics rushing toward us. "You did the right thing calling," one of them said as he helped the kids into the ambulance. I nodded, swallowing the tightness in my throat. But I wasn't thinking about being right. I was thinking about how easily this night could have ended in tragedy. And how their parents still had no idea. Or worse, how they wouldn't even care. The fluorescent lights in the pediatric emergency department always felt too bright at night, harsh, clinical, exposing every flaw and fear. I'd worked in a similar ER for years, but sitting in the waiting area as a family member felt different. Worse. I had no control here, no monitors to read, no medication to push, no orders to carry out. Just a hollow ache in my chest and adrenaline that refused to fade. The paramedics wheeled Lily and Mason past the triage station. They were bundled in warm blankets, for lines already taped to their small arms. Their skin was still pale, tinged with that frightening blue around the lips. Their eyes kept fluttering shut. "Stay with us, sweetheart," a nurse murmured to Lily as they pushed her toward a treatment bay. I followed close behind, answering rapid-fire questions from the charge nurse. "Exposure time?" "Estimated over an hour." "Any loss of consciousness?" "No, just extreme lethargy." "Underlying conditions?" "Not that I know of." "Parents?" Silence. "Not present," I said, jaw tightening. "Not reachable." The nurse gave me a look, a familiar one. Quiet judgment mixed with alarm. She didn't have to say it. I knew exactly what she was thinking. This wasn't an accident. Not with temperatures like this. Not with kids this underdressed. Not with parents completely unreachable. Several staff members recognized me from inter-hospital transfers or night shift rotations. One of the residents, a guy I'd trained with years ago, approached gently. "Is that your niece and nephew?" "Yeah," I whispered. "They showed up at my door." He exhaled slowly through his nose. "Jesus. I'm sorry." The medical team worked methodically, warm 4 fluids, heated blankets, active rewarming, external warming pads, blood work. Their little bodies were fighting to stabilize. Even after 20 minutes, Lily still couldn't fully stop trembling. "She has early hypothermia," the attending finally said. "We'll get them both stabilized, but they're lucky. Extremely lucky. Lucky. Lucky they hadn't gone into cardiac arrest. Lucky they hadn't collapsed in the snow. Lucky I wasn't on a night shift, gone for 14 hours. Lucky they'd remembered my address." The reality made my stomach twist violently. If I hadn't been home. The attending tapped notes into the chart. "We're required to notify Child Protective Services and the police. I assume you understand?" I nodded. Professionally, I understood. Personally, I felt like the floor had tilted. This was only the beginning. 40 minutes later, while Lily slept under a warming device and Mason sipped hot broth from a styrofoam cup, my phone buzzed. "Ethan." Perfect timing. I stepped out into the hall, inhaling the sharp smell of disinfectant. When I answered, the noise from the background hit me first: music, chatter, clinking glasses. He was still at the party. "You calling me at 5 in the morning for what?" he slurred. "Do you have any idea, your kids?" I snapped before he could finish. "They're in the hospital." Silence. Muffled voices. Then, hospital? What do you mean, hospital? What happened? You left them alone in the middle of a blizzard, I said, my voice trembling with controlled anger. The heat was off. There was no babysitter. They got locked out of the house. They came to me half frozen. They could have died. A pause. Then a loud, irritated sigh. Oh, come on. They're dramatic. Mason knows the code. No, I said. You changed it and didn't tell him. That's not, look, Sabrina and I were only gone for a few hours. They're old enough, they are 7 and 9, Ethan. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The fury in my voice was enough. I called EMS. They're getting treated for hypothermia. I expected panic. Or regret. Or at least fear. Instead he said, well, did you have to call 911? You know how CPS gets. You could have just brought them home. They couldn't get inside, I snapped. And you didn't answer your phone. His voice hardened. You're blowing this out of proportion. Don't make this a big deal. Oh, it's a big deal, I said. And CPS has already been notified. There was a rustling sound, like he was handing the phone to someone. Then Sabrina's voice, sharp, venomous. You had no right to do that, she hissed. You've wanted to make us look bad for years. We know how you are. You're jealous because Ethan and I built a life. Because we have money, and you, I hung up. I'd heard enough. The police arrived first. They spoke to me in a small family consultation room. The officer took notes, his face unreadable. Did the children explain how long they were alone? Yes, I said. Their parents left for a party and said a babysitter was coming. The sitter never arrived. Do you know how long the parents were gone? At least 8 hours, I said. Maybe more. The officer raised his brows. 8 hours? That's when the kids showed up at my door. They could have been alone longer. I don't know. Any prior concerns about neglect? I hesitated. And that was its own kind of answer. When CPS arrived, a woman in a thick gray sweater introduced herself as caseworker Delgado. She moved with the weary precision of someone who'd seen too much for one lifetime. Can you walk me through what happened? She asked calmly. I told her everything, from the knock at 4:30 a.m. to the frost on their clothes to the party background noise on the phone call. Delgado took detailed notes, nodding slowly. I'll need to speak to the children when they're awake enough, she said. And I'll need to see your home within the next day. My home? I blinked. Why? If we determine the parents' home is unsafe, and if they're deemed unfit or unavailable, the children may be placed into emergency foster care unless we can approve a kinship placement. Kinship placement. Me. My stomach dropped. My place meets code, I said. It's small, but it's safe. She gave me a sympathetic but firm look. It needs to meet specific safety standards, including proper sleeping arrangements, food, heating, and space. And we need to verify your capacity to care for them long-term if necessary. A cold wave washed over me. I lived paycheck to paycheck. My duplex was one step above, barely adequate. I had no savings left after paying off student loans. I worked 12-hour shifts with inconsistent scheduling. But none of that mattered as much as one truth: I couldn't let them go into foster care. They can stay with me, I said quietly. I'll make it work. Delgado nodded. I'm glad to hear that. We'll do our best to support you. The door swung open suddenly. Loud footsteps. Voices raised. Ethan and Sabrina had arrived. Still dressed from the party. Still smelling like liquor and expensive perfume. Still furious. What the hell is going on? Ethan demanded as he stormed into the hallway. Sabrina clung to his arm, mascara smudged, hair perfect even in her rage. She spat at me. Where are our kids? What did you tell them? What lies did you feed CPS? I opened my mouth, but Delgado stepped forward quickly. Sir, ma'am, we need to speak calmly. Your children are receiving medical treatment, because she called the cops on us. Sabrina shouted, pointing at me like an accusation. Ethan jabbed a finger toward my face. You think just because you work in a hospital you get to decide you're better than us? I didn't flinch. Your kids were freezing. I did what I had to. You could have called us first. Sabrina screeched. I did, I said. Neither of you picked up. Sabrina lunged closer, eyes blazing. You want to steal our children. That's what this is. I felt my heart pound, but my voice stayed calm. I want them safe. Ethan sneered. You're pathetic, you know that? Little Miss Savior. Always acting like you're the hero because your life is so empty, Delgado cut in sharply. If you continue speaking to her this way, I will have hospital security escort you out. But Ethan wasn't done. He stepped close enough that I smelled the alcohol on his breath. You better fix this, he said quietly, his voice trembling with anger. Tell CPS it was a misunderstanding. Say they wandered off. Or you'll regret it. Are you threatening me? I asked. No, he said. I'm warning you. Sabrina pulled him back, muttering under her breath. We'll handle this. We'll get our lawyer. We'll crush this. They stormed off toward the nurses' station, demanding to see the children, demanding to speak to supervisors, demanding someone explain how their little slip-up had turned into an investigation. The injustice of it hit me all at once, hard and sharp. They had abandoned their children. Their children almost froze to death. And yet they were the ones yelling. They were the ones acting like victims. They were the ones demanding sympathy and control. I felt my hands shake, not with fear, but with fury. Because I finally understood, protecting Lily and Mason wasn't going to be as simple as calling 911. Their parents weren't going to quietly accept responsibility. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to back down. This was going to escalate. And I would need to be ready. The hours after the confrontation blurred into something strange and exhausting, half crisis, half waiting room purgatory. Lily and Mason had been moved to the pediatric ICU for overnight monitoring, which said everything the hospital didn't want to say out loud. You don't put kids in the PICU unless their bodies need close watching. Unless doctors are still worried something could go wrong. I stayed by the glass doors, watching their small figures under warm blankets, machines softly beeping beside them. Lily was curled on her side, thumb tucked under her chin. Mason stared up at the ceiling, eyes wide awake despite everything. They looked so small. Behind me, a cluster of voices rose again, my brother and Sabrina arguing with hospital administration. The argument had gone on for so long that security guards were now stationed within earshot. We demand a different attending. Sabrina shrieked. We want the records sealed, this is a family matter. Ethan barked. Hospital policy did not bend for people like them, no matter how loud they got. But they didn't understand that. Or they refused to. One of the guards walked over to me quietly. You okay? He asked. No, I admitted. He nodded sympathetically. We've got eyes on them. They get out of line again, they're leaving the floor. I whispered a thank you, though the words felt too small. Around dawn, Caseworker Delgado asked me to step out while she interviewed the children. I lingered in the hallway, nerves twisting in my stomach. I'd seen plenty of CPS interviews in my career, parents with bruised kids, parents swearing they didn't know how a toddler got into the cleaning chemicals, parents insisting the child somehow burned themselves because they were clumsy. But seeing Lily and Mason on the other side of that glass wall? That was a different kind of heartbreak. Delgado sat at their bedside, voice soft, posture open. She didn't touch them, not without permission. She didn't push. She didn't scare them. Everything about her approach said, "I see you. I'm here. You're safe." Even from outside, I could hear some of their answers. Lily's small voice, "Mommy said to stay in our room and be quiet." Mason, quieter, "They go out a lot. They forget to leave food sometimes." My jaw clenched. Delgado continued gently. "Do you feel safe at home?" Silence. Mason looked away. Lily's eyes filled with tears. That silence was louder than anything they could have said. When the interviews were over, Delgado stepped into the hall with me. "The children disclosed enough for us to open a formal neglect case," she said. "But I also need you to prepare for something. Unless you can be approved as a kinship caregiver today, they may be placed into temporary foster care." The word foster hit me like a physical blow. "No," I whispered. "No, I won't let that happen." "I know you want to help them," she said gently. "But your home has to meet standards." I swallowed hard. "Tell me what I need to do." Before she could answer, the hospital administrator, Dr. Summers, approached us. "Ms. Rivera," she said to the caseworker, "we've had some issues with the parents." I braced myself. "They demanded access to records," Summers continued. "They attempted to intimidate nursing staff. Security has stepped in twice." "Of course they had." Summers sighed. "We also had them attempt to post videos from the hallway. Some were confrontational. One was disparaging." "Disparaging?" I repeated. "They recorded themselves accusing our staff of misconduct and claiming you abducted the children." My stomach dropped. Already? Already they were spinning a narrative? Summers didn't look surprised. "We've ordered them to delete the footage and stop recording. We're documenting all of it. Our legal counsel is preparing statements and securing security footage." I blinked. Legal counsel? For what? "For what they will undoubtedly try next," she said calmly. "We're not letting them drag the staff, or you, into a smear campaign." Her tone was steady, clinical, unshakable. It was the tone of someone who'd dealt with aggressive families before, and someone who wouldn't bend to them. "We are behind you," she said. The words nearly buckled me. After years of being dismissed by my own family, having someone firmly in my corner felt unreal. 2 detectives approached around 9 a.m. One was tall and serious, the other younger and more delicate in features. "We were told you're the aunt," the tall one said. "Yes. We need your full statement. And we need you to walk us through the timeline." I explained every detail again, step by step. 4:30 a.m. knock. Frozen pajamas. No shoes. No parents answering their phones. The kids saying the heat wasn't working. The changed door code. "Do you have reason to believe this wasn't a one-time incident?" the detective asked. "Yes," I said immediately. "I've seen signs for years." Documented signs? There it was, the first crack in the wall. "No," I admitted. "But I saw empty fridges. Bruises. Kids telling me they didn't eat until evening." I spoke up, but their parents always brushed me off. The detective nodded. It helps to know the pattern. CPS will dig deeper. When they finished, they told me something unexpected. We're filing this as suspected felony child endangerment. This is not minor. The words rang in my ears. Felony. Child endangerment. My brother and his wife were headed straight into a criminal case. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt relief. By early afternoon, Delgado insisted she had to inspect my duplex. I warned her, it wasn't much. The walk through my modest place was quick but thorough. She opened cabinets, checked for food variety, examined the heaters and windows, looked at the fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, and carbon monoxide alarms. It's small, she said, but clean. Safe. Warm. Her voice softened. But the children will need real beds. And more clothing. And I need to see that you have the capacity for full-time care. I swallowed. I'll do whatever I need to. I don't care what it costs. I'll pull money from anywhere. She gave me a sympathetic look that said she'd heard that before from many relatives who had far less. You have until tomorrow, she said gently. If the improvements are made, I can approve temporary placement with you. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to prove I could care for them. No savings. No backup funds. Just my salary and what little I had left in a just-in-case envelope for emergencies. I set my jaw. I'll make it work. 2 hours later, Delgado called me. We did the initial walkthrough of the parents' home. I held my breath. Her voice was controlled, but underneath it lay something hard. There was almost no food, she said. Barely anything edible. A few frozen pizzas. No produce. No milk. No basic staples. I closed my eyes. We found alcohol everywhere, she continued. Half-empty bottles. Cases stacked in the pantry. Beds. That's the next part, she said quietly. The children do not have proper beds. Mason has a mattress on the floor, no frame, no sheets. Lily has a toddler bed that's 2 sizes too small. I felt fury boil up my spine. The parents' bedroom, she added, had a brand new king-sized bed with luxury linens. Of course it did. And we also found several neighbors willing to speak, she said. My eyes snapped open. What did they say? One neighbor said she's seen the children outside asking for cans or bottles to recycle so they could buy snacks. Another said she's heard them crying late at night. Tears stung my eyes. I knew something had been off for years, but this was worse than I imagined. The perfect house. The perfect neighborhood. The perfect Instagram life. All of it a facade hiding a reality of neglect so deep it left me shaking in anger. When Ethan and Sabrina learned their home inspection went badly, they descended on the hospital again. They tried to push past security. They shouted at staff. They threatened Delgado. They screamed at me in the hallway. This is your fault. Ethan roared. You're trying to ruin us. Sabrina shrieked. They were so loud that several patients peeked out of their rooms. Security guards stepped in. This is your only warning, one guard said. If you continue, we will escort you out. But they didn't stop. In fact, Sabrina shoved me. It wasn't hard, just enough to jar me, enough to make the guards move. Hospital cameras caught everything. Within seconds, the guards restrained them. Police arrived within minutes. Delgado stood back but didn't intervene. Ethan and Sabrina were arrested in the hallway, right in front of nurses, doctors, security, and patients. Handcuffed. Furious. Still screaming. This isn't over. Ethan yelled as they dragged him away. "You'll regret this. Everyone will know what you did." I stood completely still. Not triumphant. Not satisfied. Just devastated. Because even then, even in handcuffs, they still didn't understand their children were the victims. That night, while sitting by Mason's bedside, my phone buzzed with notifications. Hundreds. Sabrina had posted a long, dramatic message on her influencer account, where she had tens of thousands of followers, claiming, "I kidnapped the kids, I fabricated abuse claims, the hospital staff colluded with me, CPS was incompetent." This was all a jealous vendetta. Comments flooded in from people who didn't know the truth. "You're disgusting. How could you steal someone's kids? This nurse should be fired." Jealous auntie strikes again. My hands shook. My pulse pounded. But within the hour, the hospital's legal counsel released an official statement, blunt and merciless: "The allegations circulating on social media are false. We have documented evidence, including security footage, medical assessments, and reports, all contradicting Ms. Hale's claims. Defamation and obstruction of a child protective investigation are serious offenses. Legal action is being considered." I stared at the screen, breath caught in my chest. The hospital had defended me. Publicly. Fully. Not just to protect me, but to protect the truth. It was the first time in my life that a system stepped in not to fail, but to support. The next morning, Delgado returned with news. "The children cannot return to their parents' home," she said. "Your brother and his wife will remain in custody until bail is processed. You are the only available relative." My heart pounded. "So, they can stay with me?" She hesitated. "Your home is close," she said. "I need just a few things before I can approve it." And that was the moment everything shifted. Because I knew, down to my bones, that this wasn't temporary anymore. This wasn't an overnight emergency. This was the beginning of a war. A war for two children who had been neglected their entire lives. A war for their future. And I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The first twist didn't hit all at once. It came in fragments, statements, reports, quiet comments from staff, and details buried in the CPS inspection notes. But as the pieces came together, a clearer, uglier picture formed. The mansion, my brother's perfect, polished, Instagram-ready mansion, was a shell. A luxury facade with nothing inside. When Delgado returned to the hospital late that afternoon, she carried a thin stack of printed photos from the home inspection. She asked if we could talk privately, and we stepped into an empty conference room where the hum of the fluorescent lights felt unnaturally loud. "I need you to see this," she said. She laid the photos on the table one by one. The first showed the kitchen. Huge, marble countertops. Designer appliances. And nothing else. "Where's the food?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. Delgado tapped the corner of the photo. "This is the entire pantry." I leaned closer. A box of instant rice. 3 expired cans of soup. Half a bottle of vodka tucked behind the cereal. Nothing fresh. Nothing for growing children. Another photo, inside the fridge. A single takeout container. A bottle of champagne. 6 energy drinks. Nothing else. My chest tightened painfully. Another photo, Mason's room. Just a thin mattress on the floor. No sheets. No pillow. A single lamp plugged into an extension cord. I swallowed hard. He never told me it was like this. He probably thought it was normal, Delgado said softly. She laid down another photo, Lily's bed. A toddler bed meant for a 3-year-old. Pink plastic. Cracked on one side. The mattress was too small, leaving gaps along the edges. "She's 7, I whispered. "How was she supposed to sleep in that?" Delgado didn't answer. The next photo showed piles of expensive jewelry, unopened makeup PR boxes, designer shopping bags, and ring lights scattered across the master bedroom. "Your brother and his wife have invested heavily in appearances," she said. "But not in necessities." I felt sick. All those years I believed their wealth meant security. All those years I thought the kids were spoiled. All those years I thought I was the one struggling while they thrived. But the truth was more horrifying. They poured money into alcohol, parties, status symbols, and their online image, and left their children starving and cold in their own home. Delgado placed one final photo on the table. "This was in the backyard," she said. "Do you recognize it?" I stared at the image. A trash bag, tied up tight, next to the recycling bins. She handed me the report page. Inside the trash bag were empty wine bottles, a few granola bar wrappers, and several small, dirty plastic bottles that once held children's smoothies, all of them rinsed out. Based on the neighbor statements, Delgado said quietly, "We believe the children were collecting bottles around the neighborhood to redeem for spare change. Possibly to buy snacks." I covered my mouth. My entire body had gone cold. "They were desperate," she said. "They were hungry." My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair. "They never told me," I whispered. "They never said anything." "Children don't always understand that their reality isn't normal," she said. "And they might have been afraid." I thought of the times Lily had clung to me when I dropped them off. Of the times Mason refused to go inside before his parents were home. Of how thin they looked the last time I saw them at a barbecue. I should have known. I should have pushed harder. I should have dug deeper. But their mansion, so pristine, so perfect, had fooled me too. Delgado spoke gently. "You are not to blame for what their parents hid." But the guilt still surged through me, hot and heavy. I stared at the photos again, feeling the truth settle inside me like an anchor. This wasn't neglect born of ignorance or poverty. This was neglect born of narcissism. Born of arrogance. Born of two people who wanted the appearance of success but not the responsibility of parenthood. Their wealth didn't elevate them. It insulated them. It hid the truth behind walls that sparkled for the camera. And the biggest twist, the most important truth, was now undeniable: the mansion wasn't a safe haven. It was a cage made of ice and indifference. Lily and Mason had been living inside a lie. A beautiful lie. A dangerous lie. And that lie had almost killed them. I reached for the last photo, one of the empty fridge, and set it aside carefully. "I'm getting them out of there," I said, voice low but steady. "Whatever it takes." Delgado nodded, her expression softening. "That," she said, "is exactly what I hoped you'd say." The second twist arrived that evening, delivered not by CPS or the hospital, but by the police. Two detectives approached me outside the PICU, asking if we could speak privately. I followed them into the same conference room where Delgado had shown me the photos earlier. My nerves were already frayed, but when the older detective shut the door gently, something in his expression told me I should brace myself. "We subpoenaed the smart lock logs from your brother's home," he said. "You need to see this." My pulse quickened. "Okay." He slid a printed sheet across the table. I recognized the format: time stamps, access attempts, lock and unlock codes. Every modern security system logged activity that meticulously. "We obtained this directly from the smart home provider," he said. "These logs are accurate." I scanned the page, and my stomach dropped. The lock code had been changed at 10:14 p.m. 3 minutes after Ethan and Sabrina left for the party. What is this? I whispered. The detective tapped the line with his pen. Your brother changed the entry code that night. He did it from his phone while at the party. I blinked in disbelief. Why? Why would he change the code and not tell the kids? The younger detective answered. Witnesses from the party told us Ethan was showing off the smart lock app in front of friends, demonstrating how he could lock the whole house down with one tap. My breath caught. He changed the code, the detective continued, then bragged about how high security his home was. But he never gave the new code to his own children. The world tilted. So when the kids tried to get back inside, I murmured. They never had a chance, he said. The lock wasn't malfunctioning. It was working exactly as he said it. My mind raced. So the children were locked out because he was showing off? Yes, he said. And the logs show dozens of failed entry attempts from the kids' old code. They tried over and over for nearly an hour. My vision blurred with anger. With grief. With a level of disgust I hadn't known was possible. He locked them out, I whispered. He actually locked his kids out, in a blizzard. The detective nodded grimly. And then, he added, he silenced his phone. Turned off notifications. We have a record from the cellular provider. I stared at him, numb. So when I kept calling, he never saw the calls. Or he did and ignored them. Either way, he turned off alerts at 11 p.m. The younger detective folded his hands. We also obtained statements from party guests. Multiple witnesses described your brother as heavily intoxicated before midnight. Of course. We'll be adding charges, the older detective said. Criminal neglect. Reckless endangerment. Possibly obstruction, depending on how they handle themselves going forward. My voice came out small but steady. And Sabrina? She encouraged him, he said. One witness heard her laughing about how the kids need to learn to stop depending on us so much. I felt like my ribs might crack from the pressure building inside me. All my life, I'd believed I was the one with the unstable adulthood. The one struggling. The one who didn't have her life together. But the truth was now plain, their picture-perfect lives were rotten at the core. And their arrogance had nearly cost 2 children their lives. That night, after the detectives left, I sat beside Lily and Mason's beds for hours. The PICU was dim and quiet except for soft beeping and the rustle of nurses' steps. Mason woke first. He looked at me with eyes that were too old for a 9-year-old. Auntie, he whispered. Yes, sweetheart. Are we going back home? My chest tightened. I couldn't lie to them. But I also couldn't scare them. You're not going back there tonight, I said gently. He nodded slowly, relief visible on his face. And after that? I hesitated. Before I could speak, Lily stirred in the bed beside us, her voice a sleepy whisper. We don't want to go back, she murmured. It's cold there. And Mommy gets mad. And Daddy yells. Mason reached for my hand. A small, fragile gesture that broke me completely. Can we stay with you? He asked. My throat closed up. Yes, I whispered, squeezing his hand. I'm going to make sure you can. Because that was the moment, right then, looking at their faces, that I made my decision. Not a promise. Not a hope. A decision. I would fight for custody. Permanent custody. Whatever it took. Even if it meant ruining what was left of my relationship with my brother. Even if it meant draining my savings. Even if it meant taking on debt. Even if it cost me sleep, time, or job security. I was done waiting for someone else to save these kids. It was my turn. The next morning, Delgado returned. She looked tired but resolute. "I've recommended emergency kinship placement," she said. "But it's pending approval based on your home meeting requirements." "What do I need?" I asked immediately. She handed me a list. Beds. Dressers. Childproofing. More food variety. Better heating. Extra winter clothing. Stability plan for childcare on my work shifts. I stared at the list, heart pounding. "It's a lot," she said. "But I've seen families pull it off." I nodded. "I'll pull it off." "You'll also need legal support," she added. "Their parents will fight this hard." I already knew that. After she left, I took a deep breath and made a call I'd been avoiding for years. A family lawyer. A good one. One with a reputation for being aggressive, relentless, and expensive. His consultation fee alone was more than my rent. But when I told him everything, every detail, he didn't hesitate. "This is winnable," he said. "But you need to move fast. And you need a rock-solid home environment." "I'll do it," I said. "All of it?" "All of it." My voice didn't shake. Because the fear I might lose the kids was stronger than any fear of debt or sacrifice. That afternoon, I drained my savings account. I sold my grandmother's jewelry. I pawned the old guitar my father had given me. I listed half my furniture online. I didn't care. I bought the children beds. New clothes. A small dresser for each. A space heater. Extra blankets. Childproof locks. Groceries, real groceries, enough to fill the cabinets. By midnight, my duplex looked different, still modest, still cluttered, but transformed into something warm and safe. A home. Not perfect. Not wealthy. But full. And ready. As I finished making Lily's new bed, flannel sheets with little stars printed across them, I felt something shift in my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the struggling, overlooked younger sibling. I felt like someone strong. Someone capable. Someone who could protect. Someone who would win. Because now I wasn't just the aunt. I was the only person left fighting for them. And I would not lose. The custody hearing took place 3 days after the hospital incident, but it felt like a lifetime crammed into 72 hours. 3 days of no sleep. 3 days of constant phone calls with lawyers, CPS, detectives, and nurses. 3 days of Ethan and Sabrina blasting social media with venom while their attorneys tried to spin a narrative around overreacting hospitals and overzealous CPS workers. 3 days of fear that the system might somehow fail Lily and Mason. But I wasn't walking into that courtroom alone. When we arrived that morning, the winter sky outside was still dark. The air held that knife-sharp cold that made every breath sting. I held Lily's hand while Mason clung to my coat sleeve. They stayed close to me, eyes wide and anxious. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Behind us walked Delgado with a folder so thick I wondered how she was holding it. She gave me a reassuring nod. My lawyer, Mr. Hanley, joined us at the courthouse doors, steaming coffee in one hand, a stack of documents in the other. "You ready?" he asked. "No. Not even close." "Yes," I said. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, and cold, another sterile environment where emotions were supposed to fit inside tidy legal procedures. A judge in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a firm jaw, presided over the bench. Ethan and Sabrina sat at the opposite table. And seeing them made something inside my chest tighten. They looked polished. Composed. Sabrina wore a pastel blouse and soft curls. Ethan wore a navy suit, tie perfectly knotted. For a split second, if you didn't know the truth, they looked like two perfectly normal parents fighting for their kids. Then Sabrina shot me a look, sharp, poisonous. Ethan glared at me with cold hatred. Images of the smart lock logs, the empty fridge, the mattress on the floor, and their screaming at the hospital staff burned in my mind. Appearances. That was all they ever cared about. The kids shrank behind me as their parents stared. Sabrina whispered something to her lawyer, who nodded and stood. "Your Honor, my clients are here to correct a grave misunderstanding. Their children wandered out during a malfunction in their home's heating system and smart lock. They have no history of neglect. This entire ordeal is the result of a miscommunication and an overzealous third party inserting herself where she didn't belong." The judge's cold stare didn't budge. "Our evidence contradicts that narrative," Hanley said, rising slowly. He approached the bench with a stack of documents so thick I heard the thump when he set them down. These include the hospital intake reports, a full medical evaluation, photos from CPS, statements from neighbors, police reports, smart lock logs, phone records, security footage from the hospital, and testimony from attending physicians. The judge skimmed the top page. "Proceed." Hanley's voice was measured, calm, but carried the weight of everything we'd all witnessed. On the night in question, Mr. and Mrs. Hale left their children unattended for approximately 8 hours. There was no babysitter. The heat was off. Their smart lock code was changed by Mr. Hale at 10:14 p.m., and their children were never given the new code. The children were locked outside in subzero temperatures wearing pajamas. He paused, letting the words sink in. They walked nearly 2 miles to their aunt's duplex in the dark, at 4:30 in the morning. Nearly frozen. Sabrina let out a sharp laugh. They weren't frozen. They're fine. Kids are dramatic. The judge's head snapped up. "Mrs. Hale, you will not speak unless spoken to." Sabrina's jaw clenched, but she stayed quiet. Hanley motioned to Delgado. She stepped up with her folder. "Your Honor, during our home inspection of the Hale residence, we found conditions inconsistent with basic care standards for minors." She began to list them. No food. No bedding. No heat. Empty rooms. Lack of clothing. Broken furniture. Alcohol saturating the house. Sabrina began shaking her head violently. "Lies, she's exaggerating. Quiet," the judge said firmly. Then Hanley played the hospital footage. The entire courtroom watched as Ethan screamed at staff. As Sabrina shoved me. As they cursed at security. As they filmed themselves ranting about conspiracies and kidnapping. Silence filled the room when the footage ended. Even their lawyer had nothing to say. Then came the smart lock logs. Hanley laid the pages in front of the judge. These were obtained under subpoena. The judge's eyebrows rose as she scanned the time stamps. The detective who had interviewed me stepped forward to summarize. The smart lock code was changed by Mr. Hale while at the party. Multiple witnesses confirmed he was demonstrating the app. The children attempted the old code 32 times. They had no way to re-enter the house. He pointed to another line. Phone records show Mr. Hale turned off notifications at 11:02 p.m. And Mrs. Hale's phone? The judge asked. She had the device on Do Not Disturb for 12 hours. Sabrina's face flushed bright red, but she said nothing. The judge closed the folder and looked at them with an expression I had only ever seen on nurses when parents lied about bruises. "Mr. and Mrs. Hale," she said, Your behavior displays a level of irresponsibility and disregard for your children's welfare that this court cannot ignore." Ethan stood abruptly. "This is all my sister's fault. She manipulated everything." "Sit down, Mr. Hale," the judge ordered. "Before I have you removed." He sat. "Barely." The judge turned toward me. "Ms. Carter, are you willing to accept temporary custody of Lily and Mason while this case proceeds?" My throat tightened. "Yes, Your Honor." "Absolutely." She nodded. "Your home inspection is approved. CPS confirms your residence is safe, stable, and appropriate." Sabrina shot to her feet. "She lives in a dump. She works 18 hours a day. She's jealous and unstable. She can't take care of Mrs. Hale," the judge snapped. "If you speak again without permission, I will have you held in contempt." Sabrina fell silent, trembling with rage. The judge straightened in her chair. "Effective immediately, full temporary custody of the minors, Lily and Mason Hale, is awarded to their aunt, Ms. Carter. Parental visitation is suspended pending completion of a psychological evaluation and further review of neglect and endangerment charges." Sabrina gasped like she'd been slapped. Ethan slumped forward, head in his hands. "And," the judge added, "given the overwhelming evidence of chronic neglect, social media harassment, and obstruction, this court will strongly consider termination of parental rights if conditions do not drastically improve." It was over. For now. For today. For this moment. I exhaled, a deep, shaky breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for days. Lily and Mason pressed themselves into my sides, their small hands gripping my coat. "We can stay with you?" Mason whispered. I knelt down, pulling both of them close. "Yes," I said, voice trembling. "You're coming home with me." They clung to me like lifelines. Behind us, Ethan shouted something, muffled, angry, desperate, but his words barely reached me. They didn't matter anymore. For the first time in their young lives, Lily and Mason were leaving the courtroom with the person who actually loved them. And I was leaving with the children I would do anything to protect. It's been 5 years. 5 years since the storm. 5 years since the knock at 4:30 a.m. 5 years since the night Lily and Mason showed up half frozen on my porch and changed the course of all our lives. The legal battles didn't end quickly. They stretched on for months, court hearings, evaluations, home visits, endless paperwork. Ethan and Sabrina fought until the very end, spurred on by pride and public image more than any genuine desire to change. But evidence is a stubborn thing. Medical reports don't lie. Smart lock logs don't lie. Security footage doesn't lie. Children don't lie, not about pain, not about hunger, not about fear. Eventually, the court terminated their parental rights. Then came the criminal convictions. Child endangerment. Neglect. Reckless behavior resulting in harm to minors. They lost almost everything. A portion of their remaining assets, whatever wasn't swallowed by legal fees, was ordered into a trust fund for the kids. Money that will help pay for college, therapy, and anything else they need. They're not allowed to contact us. They don't try. Their social media smear campaign died under the weight of hospital statements, legal action, and the truth. People moved on. We healed. Slowly. We live in a modest little house on the edge of town, a small 2-bedroom with a narrow yard, a cracked driveway, and a big maple tree that drops leaves faster than we can rake them. It's fully paid off. I still work in healthcare, though I transferred to a nearby pediatric clinic with more predictable hours. I wanted stability for the kids. They deserved a parent who could be home for dinner. And yes, parent. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of myself as aunt. Somewhere along the way, they started calling me Mom. The court made it official last year. Lily is 12 now. She plays soccer, reads mystery novels, and has a laugh that fills every corner of the house. Mason is 14. He's quieter, gentle, brilliant with anything mechanical. His therapists say he's healing beautifully. I believe them, especially when I see him smiling at the dinner table, or tinkering with his bike in the driveway, humming softly. We adopted an orange cat named Honey who sleeps at the foot of their beds and guards the hallway like he's our personal security system. And yes, there's someone else in our lives now. Dr. Noah Green, a pediatric resident who helped treat the kids that first night, eventually became a friend. Then more than a friend. He never tried to replace anything or anyone, he just slipped into our lives with steady kindness and an understanding of trauma few people possess. The kids adore him. I do too. We're not rushing anything, but he's definitely family. Last week, Mason handed me something small wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a keychain, a tiny silver house with a brass heart on the door. We thought, he said shyly, that maybe it could hold the new house key. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Because our home key meant something different to them. It wasn't just a way inside. It was proof that no door would ever lock them out again. Not by accident. Not by neglect. Not by arrogance. Not ever. I replaced my old, worn keychain with theirs and hugged them both so tightly they laughed. And as I looked around our cozy living room, the mismatched furniture, the warm lighting, the smell of dinner on the stove, I realized something. This wasn't the house I grew up in. It wasn't the mansion with empty rooms and silent hallways. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't glamorous. But it was safe. And warm. And full. A real home. A place where two children, once locked out in the freezing dark, finally had a future, one they controlled, one they helped build, one they knew would never vanish behind a code changed for show. And for the first time in their lives. A place where the door always opens. If you liked this story, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.